The sun was high in the sky when Jake Morrison rode into Cedar Ridge. His horse was tired and dusty from the long trip. Jake looked around the small town as he slowly rode down the main street. There were a few shops, a church, and a saloon. People stopped what they were doing to look at the stranger. Jake was 28 years old and tall. He had dark hair and quiet blue eyes. His clothes were simple but clean. His hat was old but well cared for. Everything he owned was tied to his horse or in his small bag. He had left Kansas 3 weeks ago. There were too many bad memories there. His father had died the year before. His mother had passed away when he was just a boy. Jake had no family left and no reason to stay. He heard there was work at the Whitmore Ranch near Cedar Ridge. That was all he needed to know. Jake stopped, his horse in front of the general store. An old man sat on a wooden chair outside the shop. The man had gray hair and kind eyes. "You look like you came a long way," the old man said. "Yes, sir." "From Kansas," Jake replied. He got down from his horse and stretched his back. "What brings you to Cedar Ridge? Looking for work? I heard the Whitmore Ranch might need help." The old man smiled. "You heard right. Tom Whitmore is always looking for good ranch hands. The ranch is about 5 miles outside town. You can't miss it. It's the biggest spread around here." Jake thanked the man and bought some supplies. He asked directions to the ranch. The store owner told him to follow the road west until he saw a big wooden gate. As Jake got ready to leave town, he noticed people still watching him. A group of young women stood near the church. They were whispering and pointing at him. Jake tipped his hat to be polite but did not stop to talk. The ride to the Whitmore Ranch was beautiful. Green fields stretched out on both sides of the road. Cattle grazed in the distance. Mountains rose up behind the ranch. Jake could see why someone would want to live here. The ranch gate was easy to find. It was made of strong wood and had Whitmore Ranch carved into it. Jake rode through the gate and up a long dirt road. He passed barns, corrals, and bunkhouses. Cowboys were working with horses and fixing fences. Some stopped to look at him. The main house was big and painted white. It had a wide porch with rocking chairs. Flowers grew in boxes under the windows. Jake could tell this was a successful ranch. A man came out of the house as Jake rode up. He was about 50 years old with gray hair and a mustache. He wore clean clothes and good boots. This had to be Tom Whitmore. "You looking for work?" the man asked. Jake got down from his horse. "Yes, sir, I'm Jake Morrison. I came from Kansas." Tom looked Jake up and down. He seemed to like what he saw. "Can you handle cattle?" "Yes, sir. Been working with cattle since I was 12. "Can you break horses?" "I can." "What about fixing fences and barn work?" "I can do whatever needs doing." Tom smiled. "Good. We need men who aren't afraid of hard work. The pay is $30 a month plus food and a place to sleep. You interested?" Jake nodded. "Yes, sir. When do I start?" "Right now. Take your horse to the barn. Charlie will show you where to put your things." An older cowboy walked over. He had kind eyes and a friendly smile. "I'm Charlie Watson. Been working here 15 years. Come on, I'll show you around." Charlie led Jake to the barn. It was clean and well organized. There were about 20 horses in the stalls. Jake put his horse in an empty stall and gave it food and water. "Good-looking horse," Charlie said. "What's his name?" "Thunder," Jake replied. "He's been with me for 5 years." Charlie showed Jake the bunkhouse where the cowboys slept. It was a long building with beds along the walls. Each man had his own space. Charlie pointed to an empty bed near the window. "That one's yours. Supper is at 6. Cookie rings a bell. When it's ready." Jake put his few things on the bed. He had 2 extra shirts, another pair of pants, and some personal items. Everything fit in a small wooden box. "You travel light," Charlie observed. "Don't need much," Jake said. Charlie showed Jake around the rest of the ranch. There were barns for cattle, storage buildings, and workshops. Everything was neat and well maintained. The Whitmores clearly ran a good operation. "Mr. Whitmore is fair but strict," Charlie explained. "Work hard and he'll treat you well, 'cause trouble and you'll be gone fast." They walked past the main house. Through a window, Jake saw a young woman with golden hair. She was beautiful. Her dress was fancy and she moved like she knew people were watching her. "That's Sarah Whitmore," Charlie said quietly. "The boss's daughter. Pretty as a picture, but what?" Charlie shrugged. "She knows she's pretty. Every cowboy for 50 miles wants to marry her. She's turned down more proposals than you can count." Jake looked away from the window. He was here to work, not to chase after the boss's daughter. That evening, Jake ate supper with the other cowboys. The food was good. A quiet woman served the meal but did not talk much. She wore a simple black dress and kept her eyes down. "When die?" She brought Jake his plate. She nodded politely but said nothing. "That's Emma Carter," one of the cowboys whispered. "She's a widow, cooks for us and helps around the house." Jake noticed that Emma worked hard. She served everyone and cleaned up without complaining. She seemed sad but did her job well. After supper, the cowboys sat outside and talked. They told Jake about the ranch and the work. They also talked about the people in town. Jake listened but did not say much about himself. "Where are you from in Kansas?" one man asked. "Small town called Millfield," Jake answered. "Nothing much there." He did not tell them about the trouble he had left behind. Some things were better left in the past. As the sun went down, Jake walked around the ranch by himself. It was peaceful here. The mountains looked purple in the evening light. Cattle moved slowly in the fields. This could be a good place to start. Jake thought about his father. The old man had always said that a man could make a new life for himself if he was willing to work hard. Maybe this was Jake's chance to do just that. The next morning, Jake woke up before sunrise. He was ready to prove himself as a good worker. He did not know that his arrival had already started people talking. He also did not know that Sarah Whitmore had been watching him from her bedroom window. Cedar Ridge was a small place where everyone knew everyone else's business. A new cowboy was big news, especially one who was young and handsome. The town would be talking about Jake Morrison for weeks to come. But Jake did not care about talk. He cared about honest work and a fresh start. As he got dressed in the early morning darkness, he felt hopeful for the first time in months. This ranch felt like home already. Sarah Whitmore stood at her bedroom window watching the new cowboy work in the corral below. It was only Jake's third day at the ranch, but she had been watching him every chance she got. There was something different about him. He was not like the other men who worked for her father. Sarah was 22 years old and knew she was beautiful. People had been telling her so since she was a little girl. Her golden hair caught the sunlight like spun gold. Her blue eyes were bright and clear. She had a tiny waist and always wore the finest dresses money could buy. Every unmarried man in 3 counties wanted to marry her. Rich ranchers' sons came calling with flowers and gifts. Store owners and bankers tried to win her attention. Even some married men looked at her with longing in their eyes. But Sarah had turned them all down. She was waiting for someone special, someone who would make her heart race and her breath catch. She had almost given up hope of finding such a man. Then, Jake Morrison rode into her life. Sarah watched as Jake worked with a wild horse in the corral. The horse was bucking and fighting, but Jake stayed calm. He moved slowly and spoke softly. Other cowboys would have used force, but Jake used patience. The horse finally calmed down and let Jake put a rope around its neck. "Impressive," Sarah whispered to herself. At breakfast, Sarah asked her father about the new hire. Tom Whitmore was reading a newspaper and drinking coffee. "What do you think of the new cowboy, Papa?" Sarah asked, trying to sound casual. Tom looked up from his paper. "Jake Morrison. He's a good worker, quiet type. Knows what he's doing with horses and cattle." "Where did he come from?" "Kansas. Said he was looking for a fresh start." Sarah wondered what kind of fresh start Jake needed. Maybe he had lost someone he loved. Maybe he had been in some kind of trouble. It made him seem mysterious and interesting. That afternoon, Sarah decided to bake cookies. She rarely cooked, but she wanted an excuse to visit the bunkhouse. She made sugar cookies, her grandmother's recipe. They turned out better than expected. Sarah put on her prettiest blue dress and fixed her hair carefully. She put the cookies in a basket and walked to where the cowboys were working. "Good afternoon, boys," she said sweetly. The cowboys stopped what they were doing and tipped their hats. Most of them looked nervous. They were not used to Sarah coming around. "I brought you some cookies," Sarah announced. "Fresh from the oven." The men gathered around eagerly. Sarah made sure to stand close to Jake when she offered him the basket. "Thank you, Miss Whitmore," Jake said politely. He took a cookie but did not seem as excited as the other men. "Please call me Sarah," she said with her brightest smile. Jake nodded but did not smile back. "These are very good, Miss Sarah." "Thank you." Sarah stayed and talked with the cowboys for a few minutes. She asked about their work and laughed at their jokes, but her eyes kept going back to Jake. He listened politely but did not say much. When Sarah finally left, the other cowboys started teasing Jake. "Looks like you caught the eye of the boss's daughter," Charlie said with a grin. "She's never brought us cookies before," another man added. Jake just shrugged. She was being nice to all of us. But the men could see the truth. Sarah Whitmore had her sights set on Jake Morrison. The next day, Sarah found another excuse to see Jake. She said she wanted to learn more about horses. Could someone teach her to ride better? Tom Whitmore thought it was a good idea. "Jake, you're good with horses. Why don't you give Sarah some riding lessons?" Jake could not refuse his boss's request. "Of course, sir." Sarah clapped her hands together. "Wonderful. When can we start?" "Tomorrow morning, if that suits you," Jake replied. Sarah was there bright and early the next morning. She wore a fancy riding outfit that must have cost more than Jake made in 6 months. Her horse was a beautiful mare with a silver saddle. Jake was professional during the lesson. He showed Sarah how to hold the reins properly and how to sit straighter in the saddle. He explained how to guide the horse with gentle pressure. "You're a very good teacher," Sarah said. She moved her horse closer to his. "Thank you, Miss Sarah. I feel so much safer with you here. Most men just tell me what to do. You actually show me." Jake nodded but kept his distance. When the lesson was over, he helped Sarah down from her horse. For a moment, their eyes met. Sarah felt her heart flutter. "Same time tomorrow?" she asked hopefully. "If your father wants you to continue the lessons." Sarah made sure her father wanted her to continue the lessons. Over the next 2 weeks, Sarah found many reasons to be around Jake. She brought lunch to the cowboys when they were working in distant fields. She asked Jake to fix things in the main house. She invited him to join the family for dinner. Jake was always polite but never seemed to warm up to her. This only made Sarah more determined. She was used to men falling at her feet. Jake's indifference was both frustrating and exciting. Sarah began reading poetry books, thinking Jake might like intelligent conversation. She practiced playing the piano, hoping to impress him with her talents. She even asked the town dressmaker to create new outfits that would catch his eye. "You're acting strange lately," her father observed one evening. "What do you mean, Papa?" "All this sudden interest in poetry and music. And you've been spending a lot of time around the ranch hands," Sarah blushed. "I'm just trying to learn more about the ranch business." Tom Whitmore was not fooled, but he did not say anything more. Meanwhile, the other cowboys watched Sarah's pursuit with amazement. They had never seen anything like it. The most beautiful and sought-after woman in the territory was chasing after their quiet friend. "Jake, you're crazy if you don't court that girl," one of them said. "She's rich, beautiful, and her father owns half the county." "Sarah Whitmore could have any man she wants," another added. "And she wants you." Jake just shook his head. "Miss Sarah is a fine young lady, but she's the boss's daughter. I'm just a hired hand." "So what? Her father likes you. You're a good worker. Why not try?" But Jake always changed the subject when the men brought up Sarah. Sarah could see that her usual methods were not working. Most men would have declared their love by now. Jake remained friendly but distant. She needed to try something different. Sarah decided to ask Jake about his past. Maybe if she understood him better, she could find a way to his heart. One afternoon, she found Jake alone in the barn. He was cleaning equipment and seemed deep in thought. "Jake, may I ask you something personal?" He looked up from his work. "Of course, Miss Sarah." What made you leave Kansas? You must have had friends there. Maybe even a special girl? Jake was quiet for a long moment. No special girl, he said finally. Kansas just had too many memories. Sometimes a man needs to start fresh. Bad memories? Jake nodded but did not say more. Sarah felt a rush of sympathy. I'm sorry. It must have been hard to leave everything behind. It was the right thing to do. Sarah wanted to comfort him, but Jake went back to his work. She could see the conversation was over. That evening, Sarah sat on her bedroom window seat, thinking about Jake. He was different from any man she had ever known. He was strong but gentle, mysterious but honest, handsome but humble. Sarah had never had to work for a man's attention before. Every other suitor had pursued her. Jake was making her do the chasing, and she found it thrilling. She decided she would not give up. Jake Morrison was worth fighting for. Sarah Whitmore always got what she wanted, and she wanted Jake. But what Sarah did not know was that Jake's heart was already beginning to notice someone else. Someone who worked quietly in the shadows. Someone who never demanded attention but had a beauty all her own. The race for Jake's heart was about to become more complicated than Sarah could imagine. Emma Carter woke up every morning at 5 o'clock. The sky was still dark and the ranch was quiet. She liked this time of day. It was peaceful before the busy day began. Emma was 26 years old but felt much older. She had been a widow for 3 years now. Her husband Robert had died in a mining accident when she was just 23. The mine collapsed and buried him along with 12 other men. After Robert died, Emma had nothing left. They had no children. Robert's family lived far away and barely knew her. Her own parents had died when she was young. The debts from Robert's medical bills and the funeral took everything they owned. Emma had to find work to survive. Mrs. Whitmore needed help in the kitchen, and Emma was grateful for the job. It paid enough for her to rent a tiny room above the general store in town. She worked 6 days a week and walked the 5 miles to and from the ranch every day. Emma dressed simply in black dresses. She had 3 of them, all the same style. Black was proper for a widow, and it hid stains from kitchen work. Her brown hair was always pulled back tight and pinned up. She wore no jewelry except her wedding ring. The cowboys mostly ignored Emma. Some were respectful and tipped their hats when they saw her. Others acted like she was invisible. A few made crude jokes when they thought she could not hear them. Emma did not mind being ignored. She had work to do and did not have time for foolishness. She cooked breakfast for 15 men every morning. She prepared lunch and dinner too. She also helped Mrs. Whitmore with cleaning and laundry. Emma was good at her job. She could cook for a crowd and never burned anything. She knew how to make a little food go a long way. She could prepare simple meals that filled hungry cowboys and keep them happy. But Emma had another talent that few people knew about. She was smart about business. Her father had taught her to read and write well. She understood numbers and could keep track of expenses. She noticed things that others missed. For example, Emma saw that the ranch was spending too much money on food supplies. The cook before her had not been careful about portions. Cowboys were wasting food and costs were too high. Emma started measuring everything carefully. She found ways to use leftovers. She made sure nothing was thrown away that could be used again. Within a month, the food costs went down by almost 20%. Mrs. Whitmore noticed the savings but said nothing. Emma was just a hired girl, and Mrs. Whitmore did not want to praise her too much, but secretly she was impressed. Emma also noticed problems with some of the ranch equipment. She saw that the stove in the kitchen needed repair before it became dangerous. She spotted a leak in the roof of the storage barn that would ruin grain, if not fixed soon, but Emma kept these observations to herself. She was just the cook. No one wanted advice from a poor widow. When Jake Morrison arrived at the ranch, Emma barely looked up from her work. New cowboys came and went all the time. She served his meals like she served everyone else's. She was polite but said nothing beyond good morning and here's your plate. Jake seemed different from the other men, though. He always said thank you when she brought his food. He never made crude jokes or stared at her. When she was carrying heavy pots, he would offer to help if he was nearby. Most cowboys took their help for granted. They expected to be fed and never thought about the work that went into their meals. Jake seemed to understand that cooking for 15 men was hard work. On Jake's third day at the ranch, Emma was struggling with a heavy pot of stew. The handles were hot and her hands were not strong enough to lift it safely. Jake appeared at her side. "Let me help you with that," he said quietly. Emma hesitated. She was not used to help from the cowboys. "It's no trouble," Jake added. "That pot looks heavy." Emma nodded and let him carry the pot to the dining area. "Thank you," she said softly. "You're welcome, Mrs. Carter." Emma was surprised that he knew her name. Most of the cowboys just called her Cookie or the Widow. After that, Jake often helped Emma with heavy lifting. He never made a big show of it. He would just appear when she needed help and disappear when the task was done. He never expected anything in return. Emma began to notice other things about Jake. He was quieter than the other men. He did not join in when they told crude stories or made jokes about women. He read books in the evening when the others played cards and drank. Jake also treated his horse with kindness. Emma had seen cowboys who were rough with their animals, but Jake was always gentle. He talked to his horse like it was a friend. One morning, Emma was preparing breakfast when she heard shouting outside. One of the cowboys had been thrown by a wild horse and was hurt. Everyone was gathered around him trying to help. Emma grabbed clean rags and a basin of water. She ran outside to see if she could help. The cowboy had a deep cut on his arm and was bleeding badly. "Someone needs to ride to town for the doctor," Tom Whitmore was saying. "I'll go," Jake volunteered. He was already moving toward his horse. "Wait," Emma called out. Everyone turned to look at her. She rarely spoke up in front of the men. "The cut is deep but not too bad," Emma said, examining the wound. "If we clean it well and bandage it tight, he should be fine. No need for the doctor." The injured cowboy looked scared. "What does she know about doctoring?" "I helped the doctor in town when my husband was sick," Emma explained. "I learned a few things." Emma cleaned the wound carefully and bandaged it with steady hands. She had Jake hold the cowboy's arm still while she worked. Their hands touched briefly as they helped the injured man. "That should heal fine," Emma said when she was finished. "Keep it clean and dry." The cowboy looked at his bandaged arm with surprise. The bleeding had stopped and it felt better already. "Thank you, Mrs. Carter," he said. "I'm sorry I doubted you." Emma just nodded and went back to the kitchen to finish breakfast. But Jake lingered for a moment. "That was well done," he said quietly. "You have gentle hands." Emma felt her cheeks get warm. It was nothing special. "It was to him," Jake replied, nodding toward the injured cowboy. As the days passed, Emma found herself looking forward to Jake's small kindnesses. He always thanked her for meals. He helped without being asked. He treated her with respect. Emma had forgotten what it felt like to be treated like a person instead of just a servant. With Robert, she had been a wife and partner. After he died, she became invisible to most people. But Jake saw her. He noticed when she was tired from a long day. He saw when she was struggling with heavy work. He treated her like she mattered. Emma began to take a little more care with her appearance. She still wore black dresses, but she chose the newer one more often. She loosened her hair just slightly, so it was not pulled back quite so severely. One evening, Emma was cleaning up after dinner when she realized she was humming. She had not hummed or sung since Robert died. The realization stopped her cold. Emma looked around the empty kitchen and felt confused. Why was she humming? Why did she feel lighter somehow? Then she understood. For the first time in 3 years, Emma was beginning to feel alive again, and it had something to do with the quiet cowboy who always said thank you. But Emma pushed these thoughts away. She was a widow in mourning. It would not be proper to have feelings for another man so soon. Besides, Jake was just being kind. He probably felt sorry for her. Emma did not know that Jake had begun to notice her too. She did not see how his eyes followed her as she worked. She did not notice that he found excuses to be in the kitchen area more often. While Sarah Whitmore chased after Jake with flowers and fancy dresses, Emma Carter worked quietly in the shadows. She had no idea that her simple kindness and gentle nature were slowly winning the heart she thought could never be hers. The stage was set for a choice that would surprise everyone, including Jake himself. The storm came without warning on a late April evening. Dark clouds rolled in from the mountains and the wind picked up fast. Rain started falling in heavy sheets that made it hard to see more than a few feet ahead. Jake had been working late, in the far pasture checking on cattle. When the storm hit, he was too far from the bunkhouse to make it back safely. The closest shelter was the ranch kitchen, which had a separate entrance from the main house. Jake ran through the rain and pushed open the kitchen door. Water dripped from his hat and clothes onto the wooden floor. He was surprised to find Emma still working inside. "Sorry to barge in," Jake said, taking off his wet hat. "The storm caught me." Emma looked up from the bread dough she was kneading. "It's all right. I was just getting tomorrow's bread ready." Lightning flashed outside the windows, followed by loud thunder. The storm was getting worse. "Looks like we're both stuck here for a while," Jake said. Emma nodded and went back to her work. Jake stood by the door, not sure what to do. He did not want to drip water all over her clean kitchen. "There are some old rags in that cabinet," Emma said without looking up. "You can dry off if you want." Jake found the rags and wiped the water from his face and hands. He hung his wet jacket on a hook by the door. The kitchen was warm and smelled like fresh bread and coffee. "Would you like some coffee?" Emma asked. "I made a fresh pot." "That would be nice. Thank you." Emma poured coffee into a thick mug and handed it to Jake. Their fingers touched briefly when he took the cup. Emma quickly pulled her hand back. Jake sat down at the wooden table where the Cowboys usually ate. Emma continued working with the bread dough. For several minutes, only the sound of the storm filled the kitchen. "How long have you been working here?" Jake asked. 3 years, Emma replied. "Since my husband died." "I'm sorry for your loss." Emma's hands paused in their work. "Thank you, it was a long time ago." "Does it get easier?" Jake asked softly. Emma looked at him with surprise. "What do you mean? Losing someone you care about. Does the pain ever go away?" Emma could hear something in Jake's voice. Pain. Loss. She realized he understood what she had been through. "You lost someone too," she said. It was not a question. Jake nodded and stared into his coffee cup. "My father, last year, he was all the family I had left." "How did he die?" "Sickness. I watched him get weaker every day and couldn't do anything to help him." Emma felt her heart tighten with sympathy. She knew what it was like to watch someone you love suffer. "The pain gets different," she said finally. "It doesn't go away, but it changes. At first it feels like you can't breathe. Then one day you realize you made it through a whole hour without thinking about it. Then a whole day." Jake looked up at her. "Do you still miss him? Your husband?" "Every day. But I remember the good times more than the sad ones now." Emma shaped the bread dough into loaves and put them in pans to rise. She wiped her hands on her apron and poured herself a cup of coffee. "Is that why you left Kansas?" she asked. "Too many memories?" "Partly. But there were other reasons too." Emma waited, but Jake did not say more. She understood. Some pain was too deep to share with strangers. Thunder crashed overhead and the rain pounded harder on the roof. Emma looked out the window but could see nothing in the darkness. "This storm might last all night," she said. "I hope the cattle are finding shelter." "You really care about the animals, don't you?" Jake seemed surprised by the question. "I suppose I do. They depend on us to take care of them. Most cowboys see them as just money on legs. That's a sad way to look at life. Everything deserves respect." Emma sat down across from Jake at the table. This was the longest conversation she had with anyone in months. "Where did you learn about cattle?" she asked. "My father had a small ranch. Nothing like this place, but we had a few head. He taught me that if you take care of the land and animals, they'll take care of you." "That sounds like good advice. What about you? Did you always want to be a cook?" Emma almost smiled. "No, I Wanted to run a ranch someday. My father had a small spread, too. He taught me about cattle and horses and managing land. Jake looked interested. Really? That's unusual for a woman. My father always said brains mattered more than whether you wore pants or a dress. He taught me to read and write and do numbers. He showed me how to spot good breeding stock and bad. What happened to your father's ranch? Emma's face grew sad. We had to sell it to pay for his medical bills when he got sick. After he died, I married Robert. He was a good man, but he wanted to try mining instead of ranching. Do you regret it? Giving up ranching? Emma thought for a moment. I regret that Robert died so young, but I don't regret marrying him. He was kind to me. They sat in comfortable silence for a while, listening to the storm. Emma refilled their coffee cups. Can I ask you something? Emma said. Of course. Why don't you pay attention to Sarah Whitmore? Every cowboy for miles around wants to court her. Jake was quiet for so long that Emma thought he would not answer. Miss Sarah is beautiful, he said finally. But beauty isn't everything. What is everything? Jake looked directly at Emma. Kindness, honesty, someone who sees the world the same way you do. Emma felt her cheeks grow warm under his gaze. She looked down at her coffee cup. Sarah is kind, she said softly. Sarah is charming, Jake corrected. That's not the same thing as kind. Emma knew he was right. Sarah was sweet when she wanted something, but Emma had seen her be cold to people she thought were beneath her. Besides, Jake added, I think a man and woman should be partners. Sarah Whitmore doesn't need a partner, she needs an audience. Emma looked up at him in surprise. That's a very honest thing to say. I try to be honest. Life's too short for pretending. Lightning lit up the kitchen windows again. The storm was still fierce outside. What kind of woman would you want as a partner? Emma asked. She was not sure why she asked such a personal question. Jake thought carefully before answering. Someone who's not afraid of hard work. Someone who's been through tough times and came out stronger. Someone who understands that the best things in life are simple ones. Emma felt her heart start beating faster. Was Jake describing her? Or was she just imagining things? That sounds like a practical choice, she said. Love should be practical, Jake replied. Feelings fade if they're not built on something solid. Emma had never heard a man talk about love that way. Most men she knew thought love was all about passion and romance. Did you love your husband? Jake asked quietly. Yes, but it was a quiet kind of love. Comfortable. Safe. That sounds nice? It was. Robert was my best friend. They talked through the night as the storm raged outside. Emma told Jake about her childhood on her father's ranch. Jake shared stories about growing up with just his father for company. Emma learned that Jake could read well and loved books about history and adventure. Jake discovered that Emma knew as much about cattle breeding as most ranch foremen. As dawn approached, the storm finally began to ease. The rain slowed to a gentle patter and the thunder moved away. I should get back, Jake said reluctantly. The other men will wonder where I am. Emma stood up and began cleaning the coffee cups. Of course. Jake put on his still damp jacket and hat. He paused at the door and turned back to Emma. Thank you for the coffee. And the conversation. You're welcome. Emma? Jake said softly. She looked up at him. It was the first time he had used her first name. You're not invisible, he said. Not to me. Then he was gone, leaving Emma alone in the kitchen with her racing heart. Emma went through the motions of preparing breakfast, but her mind was elsewhere. She kept thinking about Jake's words and the way he had looked at her. For the first time since Robert died, Emma allowed herself to imagine what it might be like to love someone again. The thought terrified and thrilled her at the same time. She did not know that Jake was having the same thoughts as he walked back to the bunkhouse in the gray morning light. Summer came to Cedar Ridge with long, hot days and warm nights. Jake had been working at the Whitmore Ranch for 3 months now. He had proven himself to be one of the best cowboys Tom Whitmore had ever hired. Jake could break horses that other men could not handle. He could spot sick cattle from far away. He worked harder than men half his age and never complained. Tom was thinking about making him a foreman when the current foreman retired next year. But Tom was also aware of something else. His daughter, Sarah, was clearly in love with Jake Morrison. Sarah had never pursued a man so openly before. She found excuses to be around Jake every day. She brought him special meals and cold drinks when he worked in the hot sun. She asked him to escort her to church on Sundays and to the town dances on Saturday nights. Jake was always polite to Sarah, but Tom could see that the young man's heart was not engaged. Jake treated Sarah with respect, but no special warmth. He accepted her invitations because it would be rude to refuse, but he never seemed excited about spending time with her. What puzzled Tom even more was where Jake's attention actually went. Tom had noticed that Jake often found reasons to be in or near the kitchen. He helped Emma Carter with heavy work without being asked. He always thanked her especially warmly for meals. At first, Tom thought Jake was just being kind to a poor widow. But lately, Tom had seen the way Jake looked at Emma when he thought no one was watching. There was something in his eyes that was never there when he looked at Sarah. Meanwhile, Jake was struggling with his own feelings. Every day, his attraction to Emma grew stronger. Every conversation they had revealed new things to admire about her. Emma was intelligent in ways that surprised him. She could discuss cattle breeding and ranch management better than most men. She had opinions about politics and books that were thoughtful and interesting. Emma was also kind in a way that came naturally to her. She never tried to impress anyone, but she was always ready to help when someone needed it. She had nursed 3 sick cowboys back to health during the spring. She had mended clothes and written letters for men who could not read or write. Most of all, Emma understood loss and hardship. When Jake talked about missing his father or feeling alone in the world, Emma listened with real sympathy. She did not try to cheer him up with silly words. She just understood. Jake began finding more excuses to spend time with Emma. He offered to walk her home to town after work. He helped her carry supplies from the store to the ranch. He fixed things in the kitchen that did not really need fixing. Emma seemed to enjoy his company too. She smiled more often now. Sometimes Jake caught her humming while she worked. She had started wearing her hair a little looser and he thought she looked prettier every day. One evening in late June, Jake was walking Emma home when she stopped suddenly. "Jake, can I ask you something?" "Of course. Why are you so kind to me? I'm just the cook." Jake stopped walking and looked at her seriously. "You're not just anything, Emma. You're a remarkable woman." Emma felt her cheeks grow warm. "I'm not remarkable. I'm just a poor widow who cooks and cleans. You're intelligent and kind and strong. You've been through terrible loss, but you haven't let it make you bitter. You work hard and never complain. How is that not remarkable?" Emma looked down at her hands. "You don't know everything about me. Then tell me. I want to know everything about you." Emma's heart started beating faster. Jake sounded like a man who was falling in love. But that could not be possible. "What about Sarah?" Emma asked quietly. Jake was quiet for a long moment. "What about her? She's beautiful and rich and well-educated. Her father owns this ranch. Any man would be lucky to marry her. Any man except me." Emma looked up at him in surprise. "Why?" "Because I don't love her," Jake said simply. "I respect her and I think she's a fine person, but love isn't something you can force." "Then who do you love?" Emma whispered. Jake stepped closer to her. "I think you know." Emma's breath caught in her throat. "Jake, you can't mean that." "Why can't I?" "Because I'm nobody special. Because Sarah Whitmore wants you. Because it doesn't make sense." Jake reached out and gently touched Emma's face. "It makes perfect sense to me." Emma closed her eyes and leaned into his touch. She had not felt this way since Robert died. She had forgotten how wonderful it was to be loved. "Emma, look at me," Jake said softly. She opened her eyes and saw love, and certainty in his face. "I want to court you properly," he said. "I want to ask your permission to call on you." Emma felt tears start in her eyes. "Are you sure? Once people know, there will be talk." "Let them talk. I know what I want." Emma thought about Sarah Whitmore and her golden hair and fancy dresses. She thought about what people would say when they learned that Jake had chosen the poor widow over the rich man's daughter. But she also thought about how Jake made her feel alive again. How he saw good things in her that she had forgotten about, herself. How he treated her like she was precious and important. "Yes," she whispered. "Yes, you may court me." Jake smiled and gently kissed her forehead. Then it settled. But settling things between Jake and Emma was only the beginning of their troubles. The next week, Sarah planned an elaborate picnic to celebrate the 4th of July. She invited Jake, specially, and made it clear that she expected him to escort her. The whole town would be there, and Sarah wanted everyone to see that Jake Morrison was hers. Sarah spent days preparing for the picnic. She had a new dress made in patriotic colors. She practiced playing the piano so she could entertain everyone. She made Jake's favorite cookies and planned romantic walks by the river. On the morning of the picnic, Sarah was radiant with excitement. She was sure that today Jake would finally declare his feelings for her. Maybe he would even propose. Their picnic was held in a beautiful meadow by the river. The whole town came with blankets and baskets of food. There was music and dancing and games for the children. Sarah made sure to stay close to Jake all day. She served him food and laughed at his quiet jokes. She took his arm when they walked and sat beside him during the speeches. As the sun began to set, Sarah led Jake away from the crowd to a quiet spot by the river. She had planned this moment carefully. "Jake, I have something to tell you," Sarah said, looking up at him with her brightest smile. Jake seemed to know what was coming. "Sarah, I think we should rejoin the others. Please, just listen for a moment." Sarah took his hands in hers. "I know I haven't been subtle about my feelings. Everyone in town knows that I care for you." Jake gently pulled his hands away. "Sarah, love you, Jake. I want to marry you. We could have a wonderful life together." Jake looked at this beautiful, kind young woman who was offering him everything most men dreamed of. He felt sorry for what he had to do. "Sarah, you honor me with your feelings, but I cannot marry you." Sarah's smile faded. "Why not? Is it because I'm too forward? I know ladies are supposed to wait for men to speak first, but it's not that. You're a wonderful woman. Any man would be lucky to have you as his wife. Then why not you?" Jake took a deep breath. "Because my heart belongs to someone else." Sarah stared at him in shock. "Someone else? Who?" "Emma Carter." Sarah's face went white. "Emma, the cook, the widow?" "Yes. But she's nobody. She has nothing. I don't understand." Jake's voice was gentle but firm. "She's not nobody to me, she's everything to me." Sarah felt like she had been slapped. No man had ever rejected her before. And for the kitchen help? It was impossible to understand. "Jake, you're making a mistake. Emma Carter can give you nothing. No money, no position, no beauty. I can give you everything." "She gives me what I need most," Jake replied. "She gives me love and understanding and partnership." Sarah started to cry. Her carefully planned day was ruined, her dreams were shattered. "I'm sorry, Sarah, I truly am. You deserve a man who loves you with his whole heart. That man isn't me." Jake left Sarah by the river and walked back to the picnic. People were starting to notice that Sarah was missing. When she finally returned with red eyes and a pale face, the news spread quickly. Jake Morrison had rejected Sarah Whitmore, and he had done it for the poor widow who worked in the kitchen. The scandal would be the talk of the county for months to come. The news spread through Cedar Ridge like wildfire. By Monday morning, everyone in town knew that Jake Morrison had rejected Sarah Whitmore at the 4th of July picnic. By Tuesday, they knew he had done it for Emma Carter. The reaction was swift and harsh. "Have you lost your mind?" Charlie asked Jake as they worked in the barn. "Sarah Whitmore is the catch of the county. What man in his right mind would turn her down?" Other cowboys were less kind in their opinions. They whispered that Jake must have some hidden flaw that made him afraid of a real woman. Some suggested that Emma had put a spell on him somehow. "It's not natural," one cowboy said. "No man chooses a plain widow over a beautiful young lady unless something's wrong with him." Jake tried to ignore the talk, but it was everywhere. In the bunkhouse, at meals, while working. The men could not understand his choice, and they were not shy about saying so. The reaction in town was even worse. Cedar Ridge was a small place, where everyone knew everyone's business. People took sides quickly and harshly. Most of the women were outraged on Sarah's behalf. They could not imagine any woman being passed over for Emma Carter. "Poor Sarah," they said. "How humiliating for her, and for such a nobody. Emma Carter has some nerve stealing Sarah's beau like that. She must have thrown herself at him. What else could it be?" The men were equally puzzled. They gathered at the saloon and the general store to discuss Jake's strange choice. "Morrison must be touched in the head," said the bank president. "Sarah, Whitmore could have any man she wants. Maybe he's got debts or some other secret," suggested the store owner. "Maybe he knows he's not good enough for a Whitmore. Or maybe the widow woman's got something on him," added the blacksmith. "Some folks will do anything to climb up in the world." Emma bore the worst of the gossip. Women who had barely noticed her before now watched her every move. They whispered behind her back and made cruel comments loud enough for her to hear. "Look at her, acting like she's something special now. I wonder what trick she used to catch him. Poor thing's been alone so long she probably threw herself at the first man who showed her kindness." Emma tried to hold her head high, but the constant whispers and stares wore her down. She had always been invisible before. Now she wished she could be invisible again. The worst part was the suggestion that she had somehow trapped or tricked Jake. Emma knew her own heart. She had never chased after Jake or tried to steal him from Sarah. Their love had grown naturally from friendship and understanding, but people saw what they wanted to see. They saw a desperate widow who had caught a good man through cunning. They could not imagine that Jake might have chosen her for honest reasons. Tom Whitmore was furious. His daughter had been publicly humiliated, and his ranch hand was the cause. Tom called Jake into his office the day after the picnic. "Morrison, what the hell do you think you're doing?" Tom demanded. Jake stood straight and calm. "I'm not sure. What you mean, sir?" "Don't play dumb with me, you know exactly what I mean. My daughter is heartbroken and the whole county is talking about our family. I'm sorry Sarah is hurt. That was never my intention." "Then what was your intention? To make a fool of the prettiest girl in 3 counties? Jake met Tom's angry stare steadily. "My intention was to be honest. Sarah deserved the truth." "The truth?" "The truth is that you've lost your mind. Sarah could give you everything a man could want. Sarah could give me everything except love," Jake replied quietly. Tom's face grew red with anger. "And you think that kitchen girl can?" "I know she can." Tom paced behind his desk like a caged animal. "Morrison, you're a good worker. One of the best I've ever had. But I won't have my daughter humiliated by hired help." Jake felt his stomach tighten. "What are you saying, sir?" "I'm saying you have a choice. Give up this foolishness with the widow and court Sarah properly, or find yourself another job." The threat hung in the air between them. Jake needed this job. He had nowhere else to go and no money saved up. But he could not give up Emma. "I'm sorry, Mr. Whitmore. I can't do that." Tom stared at him for a long moment. "Then you have until the end of the week to find other employment." Jake nodded and turned to leave. "Morrison," Tom called after him, "you're making the biggest mistake of your life." "Maybe," Jake said, "but it's my mistake to make." The news that Jake had been fired spread as quickly as everything else in Cedar Ridge. Now people were really talking. Whitmore gave him every chance, they said. All he had to do was apologize and court Sarah properly. Instead, he chose to throw away a good job for a woman who's not worth it. Shows you what kind of man he really is. No sense at all. Emma. was devastated when she heard about Jake losing his job. She found him in the barn that evening, packing his few belongings. "This is all my fault," she said with tears in her eyes. "You lost everything because of me." Jake stopped packing and took her hands. "Emma, listen to me. I didn't lose everything. I chose what mattered most. But your job, your home, where will you go?" "I'll find work somewhere else. There are other ranches. What if no one will hire you? What if the talk follows you wherever you go?" Jake pulled Emma into his arms. "Then we'll face it together. If you'll have me." Emma buried her face against his chest. "Of course I'll have you, but I hate that you're suffering because you love me." "Love is supposed to cost something," Jake said quietly. "If it doesn't, then it's not worth much." Emma looked up at him. "What do you mean?" "I mean that fighting for something makes it more precious. Easy love isn't real love." Emma felt her heart swell with love for this man who was willing to give up everything for her. But she also felt guilty. Jake was losing his livelihood because he had chosen her over Sarah Whitmore. The pressure from the community continued to mount. Sarah's suitors, who had been waiting patiently for years, now saw their chance. They circled like vultures, offering to comfort her and hoping to win her favor. 3 different men offered Jake money to leave town quietly. They thought if Jake was gone, Sarah might turn to one of them. $500, offered the bankers. "So I said, take it and disappear, everyone will be happier." Jake refused them all. The worst blow came from an unexpected source. Mrs. Whitmore, who had always been kind to Emma, called her into the main house. "Emma, I think it's time for you to look for other employment," Mrs. Whitmore said coldly. Emma felt like she had been hit. "Have I done something wrong with my work?" "Your work is fine, but your personal choices have created an impossible situation. I can't have you working here when you're the cause of my daughter's unhappiness." Emma wanted to defend herself, but she knew it was useless. "When would you like me to leave?" "By the end of the week." Now both Jake and Emma were losing their jobs because of their love. The whole town seemed united in their disapproval. People who had been friendly before now crossed the street to avoid them. Emma felt the weight of everyone's judgment crushing down on her. She had never wanted to cause trouble. She had just wanted to be left alone to do her work and live quietly. But love had found her anyway, and now she was paying the price. Jake found Emma crying in the kitchen on her last day of work. "I can't do this," she sobbed. "Everyone hates us. We have no jobs, no money, nowhere to go. Maybe we should just give up." Jake knelt beside her chair and took her hands. "Emma, look at me." She raised her tear-stained face to his. "Do you love me?" he asked. "Yes, but do you believe I love you?" "Yes." "Then that's all that matters. People will talk for a while, then they'll find something else to gossip about. But our love will last." Emma wanted to believe him, but the future looked so uncertain and frightening. What if we can't find work? What if we end up with nothing? Jake smiled and kissed her forehead. "Then we'll have nothing together, and that will be better than having everything apart." Emma felt some of her fear fade away. Jake was right. Whatever came next, they would face it together. Their love was worth fighting for, no matter what the cost. Winter came early to Cedar Ridge that year. By November, snow was already piling up in the mountains, and the cold winds cut through the valley like a knife. Jake had found work at a smaller ranch about 20 miles from town. The pay was poor, and the conditions were hard, but it was honest work. He rented a tiny cabin on the edge of the property, barely big enough for one person. Emma had taken a job at the hotel in town, cooking and cleaning for travelers. The work was harder than what she had done at the Whitmore Ranch, and the pay was even worse. She could barely afford her small room above the general store. Jake and Emma saw each other on Sundays when Jake rode into town for supplies. They would walk together and talk about their week. These short visits were all that kept them going through the long, difficult days. The gossip had died down somewhat, but people still watched them with disapproval. Many folks in Cedar Ridge felt that Jake and Emma were getting what they deserved for their poor choices. Pride goes before a fall, the preacher had said in one of his sermons, looking directly at Emma in the back pew. Emma tried to ignore the whispers and stares, but they wore her down. She was tired all the time from working long hours. She had lost weight because she could not afford to eat as well as before. The cold room above the store was drafty and uncomfortable, but Emma told herself that things would get better in the spring. Jake would find better work, maybe even save enough money for them to get married. They just had to survive the winter. Then disaster struck. In early December, Emma started feeling sick. At first, she thought it was just from working too hard and not eating enough. But the sickness got worse. She developed a fever and a terrible cough that kept her awake at night. Emma tried to keep working, but she could barely stand up. The hotel owner, Mr. Peters, was not a kind man. He told Emma that if she could not work, she would not be paid. "I'm not running a charity," he said coldly when Emma asked for a day off to rest. "Work or leave." Emma forced herself to keep going, but she was getting sicker every day. Her cough was so bad that she could hardly speak. Her fever made her dizzy and weak. On a cold Sunday morning, Jake came to town as usual to see Emma. He found her in her room, burning with fever, and too weak to get out of bed. "Emma, my God, how long have you been like this?" Jake asked, touching her hot forehead. "A few days," Emma whispered. Her voice was rough from coughing. "I'll be better soon." But Jake could see that Emma was very sick. She needed a doctor and medicine and someone to take care of her. She needed things that cost money they did not have. "I'm taking you to the doctor," Jake said. "We can't afford it. I don't care what it costs." Jake wrapped Emma in blankets and carried her to the doctor's office. Dr. Wilson was a good man who had been taking care of the people of Cedar Ridge for 30 years. "She has pneumonia," the doctor said after examining Emma. "It's serious. She needs rest, warm food, and medicine, and someone needs to watch her carefully." "What kind of medicine?" Jake asked. Dr. Wilson wrote down a list. The medicines would cost more money than Jake made in 2 weeks. "Doctor, I don't have much money right now," Jake said quietly. "But I'll pay you somehow." Dr. Wilson looked at Jake for a long moment. He had heard all the gossip about Jake and Emma. Most people in town thought they were fools. But Dr. Wilson had seen real love before, and he recognized it when he saw it. "Pay me what you can, when you can," the doctor said. "Right now, let's focus on getting this young lady well." Jake took Emma back to her cold room above the store, but he knew she would not get better there. The room was too cold and damp. Emma needed warmth and care. Jake made a decision that would cost him his job. He loaded Emma into a wagon and drove her to his cabin at the ranch. It was against all the rules for him to have a woman staying there, especially an unmarried woman. But Jake did not care about rules when Emma's life was at stake. For the next 2 weeks, Jake nursed Emma day and night. He fed her soup and gave her medicine. He kept the fire burning to keep her warm. He held her when she was too sick to sleep. Jake's boss, Mr. Crawford, found out about Emma staying in the cabin. He was angry and told Jake to get rid of her immediately. "Won't have unmarried people living together on my property," Crawford said. "It's not decent." "She's dying," Jake said simply. "I'm not moving her." "Then you're fired. Both of you need to be gone by tomorrow." Jake nodded calmly. "All right, but I'm not moving her until she's well enough to travel safely." Crawford was furious, but he could see that Jake would not change his mind. "You have 1 week. Then I'm calling the sheriff." Jake stayed by Emma's side, not caring about his job or what people would say. Emma was all that mattered to him. Slowly, very slowly, Emma began to get better. The fever broke after 10 days. Her cough started to ease. She was able to eat a little, soup, and sit up in bed. "You stayed with me," she said weakly when she was finally able to speak clearly. "Where else would I be?" Jake asked. "You lost your job because of me." "Again." Jake smiled and brushed her hair back from her face. "Jobs come and go. You're irreplaceable." Emma started to cry. "I'm not worth all this trouble. You're worth everything to me." As Emma got stronger, Jake told her what had happened while she was sick, how he had defied his boss and lost his job, how people in town were saying even worse things about them now. "They're saying we're living in sin," Jake said. "They're saying I took advantage of you when you were sick." Emma felt angry and hurt. How can people be so cruel? Because they don't understand what we have. They think love is about what other people think instead of what two people feel for each other. Emma was well enough to travel by the end of the week, but they had nowhere to go. Jake had no job and no references. Emma was still too weak to work. It seemed like their love was being tested beyond what they could bear. Then an unexpected ally appeared. Dr. Wilson came to the cabin on Jake's last day there. He had been thinking about Jake and Emma's situation. "I have a proposition for you both," the doctor said. Jake and Emma listened hopefully. "My wife died last year, and I'm getting too old to take care of my house by myself. Emma, I need someone to keep house and cook for me. Jake, I need someone to maintain my property and drive me to see patients in the country." Emma and Jake looked at each other with disbelief. "The pay isn't much," Dr. Wilson continued. "But there's a small cottage behind my house where you could live together as man and wife if you're willing to make that commitment." Jake took Emma's hand. "Are you willing?" he asked her. Emma smiled through her tears. Yes, I'm willing." Dr. Wilson smiled. "Then let's go into town and find the preacher. It's time to make this official." As they drove toward town, Emma leaned against Jake's shoulder. They had survived the worst test their love could face. They had lost jobs, money, and the approval of their community, but they had not lost each other. "Do you think people will ever accept us?" Emma asked. Jake kissed the top of her head. "Some will, some won't. But it doesn't matter anymore. We know who we are and what we mean to each other." Emma smiled. Jake was right. They had something more valuable than other people's approval. They had a love that had been tested by fire and proven true. The worst was behind them now. Their real life together was about to begin. Spring came to Cedar Ridge like a gift from heaven. The snow melted from the mountains and green grass began to push up through the brown earth. Flowers bloomed in the meadows and the air smelled fresh and clean. Jake and Emma had been married for 4 months now. They lived in the small cottage behind Dr. Wilson's house and worked together to take care of the old doctor and his property. Emma had never been happier. She cooked for Dr. Wilson and kept his house clean, but it was different from her old job. Dr. Wilson treated her with respect and kindness. He paid her fairly and never made her feel like a servant. Jake maintained the doctor's property and drove him to see patients in the countryside. Dr. Wilson was teaching Jake about medicine and healing. Jake found that he had a natural gift for helping sick animals and people. The cottage where Jake and Emma lived was small but cozy. Emma had made curtains for the windows and planted a garden behind the house. Jake had built shelves for their few books and a table where they ate their meals together. In the evenings, they would sit on their small porch and watch the sunset. They talked about their dreams for the future and made plans for their life together. "I want to have children someday," Emma said one evening as they watched the stars come out. "How many?" Jake asked, putting his arm around her. 2 or 3. A boy who looks like you and a girl with your kind heart?" Jake smiled and kissed her cheek. "I think that sounds perfect." Emma was blooming like the spring flowers. She had gained back the weight she lost during her sickness. Her hair was shiny, and her eyes were bright. Marriage agreed with her. Jake had changed too. He smiled more often and seemed more at peace. Working with Dr. Wilson had given him a sense of purpose he had never felt before. But the biggest change was still to come. 1. Morning in late April, Tom Whitmore came to see Dr. Wilson. The rancher looked older and more tired than Jake remembered. "Doc, I need to talk to you about the ranch," Tom said. Dr. Wilson invited Tom into his office. Jake was in the next room and could hear their conversation. "I've been looking at the ranch books," Tom said. Something's been bothering me for months. Our food costs went way down when Emma Carter was cooking for us. I couldn't figure out why. Dr. Wilson nodded but said nothing. So I asked my wife to look into it. Turns out Emma was saving us about 20% on food every month. She was careful with portions and never wasted anything. Tom paused and sighed heavily. That's not all. Emma had been keeping track of problems around the ranch, equipment that needed fixing, animals that were getting sick, supplies we were running low on. She never said anything, but she was watching, out for us. Sounds like a smart woman, Dr. Wilson said. Smarter than I gave her credit for. My new cook is costing me twice as much, and the Cowboys complain about the food constantly. Tom was quiet for a moment. Doc, I think I made a mistake. A big one. Dr. Wilson waited for Tom to continue. I fired the best ranch hand I ever had and the most valuable woman who ever worked for me. All because I was angry that my daughter got her feelings hurt. What does Sarah think about all this? Dr. Wilson asked. That's the other thing. Sarah's been miserable since the whole mess happened. She finally admitted to her mother that she never really loved Jake Morrison. She was just used to getting whatever she wanted. Tom stood up and paced around the room. Sarah said she was more in love with the idea of being in love than she was with Jake himself. She said she respects him for being honest with her instead of leading her on. Dr. Wilson raised his eyebrows. That's very mature of her. She's growing up. She's been helping her mother more and complaining less. She even said she hopes Jake and Emma are happy together. Tom stopped pacing and looked directly at Dr. Wilson. Doc, I want to offer Jake his job back. Foreman position, higher pay, and a house for him and Emma. I need good people, and I was a fool to let them go. Dr. Wilson smiled. I think you should talk to Jake about that yourself. Tom found Jake in the barn cleaning the doctor's buggy. Jake looked up when Tom approached but did not speak. Jake, I owe you an apology, Tom said. Jake stopped his work and waited. I was wrong to fire you. Wrong to blame you for Sarah's disappointment. Wrong about everything. Tom pulled out a piece of paper from his pocket. This is an offer for you. To come back to work for me. Foreman position. $60 a month plus a house and land for you and Emma. Jake looked at the paper but did not take it. Mr. Whitmore, I appreciate the offer, but I'm happy working for Dr. Wilson. Jake, I'm trying to make things right. You don't need to make anything right with me. I made my choices and I'm satisfied with them. Tom was surprised. He had expected Jake to jump at the chance to come back. Think about Emma. Wouldn't she like to have a real house and garden? Security for the future? Jake smiled. Mr. Whitmore, Emma and I have everything we need. We have each other, honest work, and people who respect us. We're not looking for anything more. Tom realized that Jake had found something more valuable than money or position. He had found contentment. Well, the offer stands if you change your mind, Tom said. Thank you. That's generous of you. Tom started to leave, then turned back. Jake, you were right about love needing to be based on something real. Sarah understands that now, too. Jake nodded. I hope she finds what she's looking for. What about you? Did you find what you were looking for? Jake looked toward the cottage where Emma was hanging laundry on the line. Her hair was loose in the spring breeze and she was humming softly. Yes, sir, I found everything I was looking for. Word of Tom Whitmore's visit spread through town quickly. People were amazed that he had offered Jake his job back and that Jake had turned it down. Morrison must be crazy, some said. Turning down a foreman job twice. But others began to see Jake and Emma differently. If Tom Whitmore thought enough of Jake to offer him a foreman position, maybe they had been wrong about him. Dr. Wilson also helped change people's minds. He spoke highly of Jake and Emma to his patients. He told people how hard they worked and how much they helped him. Jake Morrison is one of the finest young men I've ever known, Dr. Wilson told anyone who would listen. And Emma is a treasure. I'm lucky to have them both. Slowly, people's attitudes began to change. When Jake and Emma went to church on Sundays, fewer people stared or whispered. The store owners were friendlier when they came to buy supplies. One Sunday after church, Sarah Whitmore approached Emma for the first time since the picnic. Emma, may I speak with you? Sarah asked. Emma nodded nervously. I want to apologize for the way I treated you. I was angry and hurt, but that's no excuse for being cruel. Emma was surprised by Sarah's kindness. Thank you, Sarah, that means a lot to me. I also want you to know that I understand now why Jake chose you. You're a good person, and you make him happy. I can see it in his face. Sarah paused and smiled. I hope someday I can find someone who looks at me the way Jake looks at you. Emma felt tears in her eyes. I hope you do too, Sarah. You deserve to be truly loved. The two women smiled at each other, and Emma felt a weight lift from her heart. She had never wanted to be enemies with Sarah. As spring turned to summer, Jake and Emma's life together grew even sweeter. Emma discovered she was going to have a baby. When she told Jake the news, he picked her up and spun her around the kitchen. Are you happy? Emma asked, laughing. I've never been happier in my life, Jake said, setting her down gently. When? Dr. Wilson thinks sometime in January. Jake placed his hand on Emma's still flat stomach. Hello, little one, he whispered. Your mama and daddy can't wait to meet you. Dr. Wilson was delighted with the news. He had grown to love Jake and Emma like they were his own children. The idea of a baby in the house filled him with joy. I'll teach the child everything I know about medicine, he said. Boy or girl, they'll have a useful skill. As Emma's pregnancy progressed, she continued to work, but Jake and Dr. Wilson made sure she did not overdo things. Jake took over the heavier household tasks, and Dr. Wilson hired a girl from town to help with the cleaning. The people of Cedar Ridge watched Emma's pregnancy with interest. Some of the women who had been cruel to her before now nodded politely when they saw her. Having a baby made Emma seem more respectable somehow. One afternoon in late summer, Mrs. Whitmore came to visit Dr. Wilson. Emma served her tea and homemade cookies. Emma, these cookies are delicious, Mrs. Whitmore said. I never realized what a good cook you were. Thank you, ma'am. Mrs. Whitmore hesitated, then spoke again. Emma, I owe you an apology. I treated you unfairly when you worked for us. I let my loyalty to Sarah cloud my judgment. Emma set down her teacup. You were protecting your daughter, I understand that. But I was wrong. You never did anything improper. Jake's feelings for you were honest, and so were yours for him. Mrs. Whitmore looked around the cozy cottage. You've made a lovely home here. I can see that you and Jake are very happy. We are, ma'am. Very happy. I'm glad. You both deserve happiness. As autumn arrived, Jake and Emma began preparing for their baby's arrival. Jake built a cradle from oak wood and carved their initials and the baby's expected birth date into the headboard. Emma sewed tiny clothes and blankets. Dr. Wilson taught them both about caring for newborns. He wanted to make sure they were ready for anything. Babies have their own schedule, he warned them with a smile. They don't care if you're tired or busy.